Legal Aid Society is the oldest of the three and the smallest of the three. To distinguish us from Utah Legal Services, Legal Aid Society of Salt Lake handles cases that either are or can be filed in Salt Lake County only. We do domestic violence cases and family law cases like custody and divorce. Those services outside of Salt Lake County are largely provided by our other sister organization, Utah Legal Services. So I will be addressing our services here in Salt Lake County. And like I said, we're the oldest. We were formed in 1922. So next year is our 100th anniversary. Okay, next slide. That's our website. And that's important to be able to refer people to, especially if they're applying for any of our services. And we'll get into it with COVID. Most of our services are being provided on a remote basis, including our intake interviews, both for protective orders and for our family law cases. Okay, next slide. Talked about that. Next slide. So on our domestic violence, Utah is kind of strange because we have 5 different types of civil orders of protection, depending on the status of the individuals involved, and they're listed there. Okay, next slide. So on the family law side, we do basically divorce, custody, and then also guardianships for minors. So those are situations where a grandparent or Aunt Gert might be raising children that their parents have fallen off the deep end because of drugs or jail or something else, and we'll do those. Guardianships for adults, like if they're incapacitated for some reason, we don't do those because the Utah State Bar and Utah Legal Services has a specialized program. So if it was one of those types of situations, we would refer you to Utah Legal Services to get lined up for guardianship for adults. Next. So this talks about our fees. Actually, last month, Legal Aid finally got rid of all of our fees altogether. All of our domestic violence services have always been free because we get federal grants to do them. And then our domestic relations, family law cases like divorce, custody, and guardianships, we had a sliding scale fee, but we were able to eliminate all of those this year so that there's no financial barrier to our services. However, our family law cases do have a limitation of how much the family can earn. So for a regular family law case, people can make up to 200% of the federal poverty guidelines. If there's been domestic violence or sexual assault, we can do the divorce or custody case up to 300% of the federal poverty guidelines. And for our domestic violence protective orders and stalking injunction, we have no income eligibility whatsoever. So it doesn't matter what somebody makes, we can help them with their order of protection. We also have a family law clinic that I'll describe later. And again, that's free. So everything's free, free, free. That's the good news from summer of 2021. Okay, next slide. So as I mentioned, because of COVID, we had to start doing all of our services remotely. So people that are seeking a protective order or a stalking injunction, they can either just go to our website and then go to the protective orders, or they can just call this number and get us information regarding both parties so that we can do a conflict check. And once the conflict check is done, then we call them and do an intake over the phone with them. That's reviewed by our supervising attorneys. And if there's no conflict and it's a viable case, our paralegals draft all the pleadings, file them with the court. The court will issue what's called an ex parte protective order, which is an emergency order, and that goes into effect from the time that the other person, the respondent, is personally served with it by law enforcement until the court hearing. And the court hearing is held within 21 days of it being served, or the protective order being filed. And at the protective order hearing, one of our very experienced attorneys will represent our client at the protective order hearing to get the ongoing protective order. All of those protective orders that I showed you in this prior screen in the state of Utah now last 3 years. They all had different variations of duration, but now they're all 3 years. Okay, next slide. Cohabitant protective orders are for people in the red, that's the relationship. This is kind of digging down into the weeds, so I'm just going to go over these quickly. But again, depending on what the relationship between our client and the other party is, we'd be able to file a protective order, and we can figure out that during the intake. Okay, next slide. As I said, protective orders last for 3 years. They can prohibit communication. They can prohibit harming or threatening harm. They can deal with custody and parent time of minor children, and also possession of like the marital residence and the essential personal property like work computers or work tools or things like that. Protective orders regarding property and children are only meant to be kind of a stopgap until a divorce or a custody case can be filed and deal with those things on an ongoing basis. So even though protective orders are very good for helping people stay in their residences, it's not a long-term solution. Those should be dealt with in the divorce case. The civil provisions regarding children, those only last for 150 days. Again, the idea is that you go into court and you file a divorce or a custody case and get those issues taken care of in those more appropriate cases. Okay, next. Dating violence are for people that aren't married or haven't cohabited, but have been in a dating relationship. Okay, next. Again, those last for 3 years, and they can provide the same type of protections. Okay, next. Sexual assault, or for people who aren't even in a dating relationship, it's like there's been an assault, and these are generally very helpful for people that have that there might be a criminal investigation underway, but there's been no orders in the criminal case yet. And so this can prevent the sexual assault perpetrator from staying away from the victim. Okay, next. Civil stalking injunctions are kind of the catch-all for people that haven't had an interpersonal relationship, like for adult protective orders or dating violence or sexual assault. These are kind of like the neighbor versus neighbor or co-worker versus co-worker type relationships. There's been a course of conduct, which means there's been at least 2 incidents of some types of threat or violence that take place before someone could get a stalking injunction. Okay, next. Talked about this, that they're in place for 3 years. Okay, next. So these are our locations. But again, post-COVID, locations are more virtual than anything else. Prior to COVID, we did the protective orders at 3 places: the Matheson Courthouse downtown, the West Oregon Courthouse out on Redwood Road, and then the YWCA's Family Justice Center. When the circumstances allow, we will resume walk-in services at these 3 locations. But again, until then, we're doing everything over the phone and via our internet, our website. Next. So on our family law program, we do those out of our main office at behind West High School. But again, everything's being done in remotely. And these are, as I said, the 3 types of cases that we do. And again, people have to income qualify for these programs, 200% for regular divorce and custody cases, 300% if there's been domestic violence involved. So for instance, we often help people with their protective order, and it doesn't matter what their income is. But then if they need help with a custody or a divorce case, we help them in our Bridge the Gap program, where they can be up to 300% of the federal poverty guidelines to do the divorce and custody case. Okay, next. As I described all this before, going to our website, and here's the income eligibility. With the family law cases, once they've sent in their information, we then check for conflict and then send them out an application. It's a lot of information that's required in a divorce case. Maria can attest to that. And they have to send us what I call a shitload of information and documentation, because the court requires all of that in the process of doing the custody or the divorce case. Some people say, why do I have to have 2 years of tax returns? Why do I have to have a year's worth of income verification? It's because the law requires it. So Once they provide all that information, the application is reviewed by one of our senior attorneys. And then if the case is accepted, they're assigned to an attorney paralegal team. And then the paralegal will do the intake interview over the phone, draft the documents for them, and file those with the court and get their case started. If there's a default, the other side doesn't answer, we can do a divorce or a custody case in a matter of several weeks. If it's contested, it can last a couple of years. So it doesn't really matter how long it takes. That there's no fee for our clients, and we do those as expeditiously as we can. Okay, next. In a family law case, once we get the documents filed, we also have to make an assessment of can we go straight to mediation, or do we need some temporary orders to deal with things like the house and child support and stuff like that. So sometimes we'll do file a motion for temporary orders with the court, get that in place, and then we can go on to do mediation. Mediation is required in all family law cases in the state of Utah if an answer has been filed. Okay, next. Again, I talked about this. The court requires financial declarations and a bunch of documentation and verification of their incomes and their assets. Okay, next. Talked about the bridge the gap between our domestic violence program and our family law program. Again, there's no cost to this. It just expedites the application process a little bit faster. Okay, next. The other program that we have is our program where we assist people who are representing themselves, or what the legal term is pro se. And we have 2 family law clinics. And again, pre-COVID, those operated out of the Matheson West Jordan courthouses. But during COVID, we've been doing all of that remotely, either by telephone or by email. And that those folks can find those email and phone numbers on our website. But at these family law clinics, we provide people who are representing themselves with either court forms that they can file or information about the court processes. We don't give any legal advice because they're manned by paralegals. However, the paralegals can consult with the senior attorneys in our organization and then pass that legal advice on to the patron clinics. I didn't give you the numbers before, but pre-COVID, we would help between 8,000 and 9,000 people a year in our family law clinics. We would help about 2,500 people with protective orders and about 200 to 300 people a year with family law cases because they're more involved and take longer. Okay, next. Here's our hours at the different locations. Again, the Matheson Courthouse and the West Jordan Courthouse, but there's the phone number and the emails for folks. Oh, the one thing I didn't talk about was the Ask an Attorney appointment. So as part of our family law clinic, if people need to talk with an attorney on a one-on-one basis, we schedule appointments to do that for about 30 minutes once a week. And so people can call and set up an appointment. And that way the people can talk to one of our senior attorneys and tell them their situation, and then we can give them legal advice, which the clinic personnel cannot do. Okay, next. Just talked about the Ask an Attorney program. Okay, next. Okay, that's it.
Stewart,
So
we have a couple questions here in the chat. If any of these are filed against someone on DACA, do you know if it would affect their status or their DACA eligibility?
It should not do that. I'm actually going to ask Maria to answer that question because she's the expert on DACA. Oh, excuse me. No, go ahead, Maria. Chime in. You're on mute.
Okay, so basically the person or the victim in this case is protecting themselves. So they are doing something to keep safe. So as you know, immigration, USCIS, they are, they have the last word, but basically, if I'm protecting myself, I can go and apply. I'm not using any services. Well, I do, but I don't, you know what I mean? So what I'm saying is, the person feels in fear and needs a protective order, they go, because part of the process also requires certain documentation. If the person is married and is needed the divorce, so well can apply. But basically, the recommendation is that the victim speaks with the immigration attorney or the legal representative, because each case is different. But basically, no, I can be undocumented. I need a protective order. I go to visit legal aid. I have my order, and life goes on.
Also, Utah courts don't require any documentation for these civil services for a divorce or a custody case. Also, depending on a person's legal status, their marital status may make a difference on their immigration. However, if they're a victim of domestic violence, they can ask for a U visa, which basically says that they would be entitled to visa consideration even if they didn't have other legal status in the United States. And that's, they can talk to our paralegals about that. They're very versed with that. Does that answer the question on the chat? And then I'll actually pull up those questions too. Let's see, I'm reading one from Danielle. I had a client going through a divorce. Her ex applied for services with legal aid, even though his parent hired him an attorney. Then because he applied and had a file, she couldn't use legal aid for herself. What do you suggest in that situation? So if there's a legal conflict, and a legal conflict is created not necessarily if they've applied, but they would have had to have talked with one of our legal staff about their case. So just submitting an application does not create a conflict. Someone actually has to talk with either one of our paralegals or the attorney about their case before an attorney-client relationship is created. But if that took place and she is now a conflict of interest, if a person qualifies for services and is a conflict of interest, we refer them to Utah Legal Services, who should then be able to represent the other party where we have a conflict. So we have that interagency relationship with them. So I would refer her to Utah Legal Services for the conflict representation. And then from Rob, it says, sorry, just wanted to clarify, if the victim is not on DACA, but the person they are filing against is on DACA, is that person affected? I do not think so. I think the only thing that makes a difference on your legal status is if there's a crime committed and you're convicted of that crime. Protective orders are not criminal offenses. They are civil orders of protection. And if they're not violated, if the respondent doesn't violate the protective order, there are no criminal ramifications of a civil protective order. Okay, let's see.
There was an earlier question about your application. Do you have the application in Spanish?
Yes, thank you for asking that, because we were just able to automate our application process. It's been paper form forever, and so we've got a new office manager that has gotten all of that to be done in Spanish. So the questions, I think the way it works is the questions are asked in Spanish, and if the person can reply in English, that's better. But if not, we have someone on staff that can translate that application from Spanish. So that's been a huge upgrade. Maria, I see you raising your hand.
Yes, usually. I just have a question. There is a lot of people that they don't know how to use the internet.
Mm-hmm.
So do you still have the option that they receive a paper application?
Yes. And people can also call us if they can't log on to our website. So they can call and say, hey, I need an application, and then we can talk to them. So we
cool.
have both those available. And yes, if we can send out a paper application if they need to.
Okay, thank you.
Again, that's everybody. Maria worked for Legal Aid for years and years, and so she knows some of this process as much as I do. Any other questions? Thanks for the great questions. Okay. Ellie, I'll turn it back to you.
Great, thank you, Stewart. I just want to reiterate too that we can have a Q&A at the end too. So feel free to put your questions in the chat, and we can address them at the end of Joni's presentation, and then also at the end if you think of something, don't hesitate to ask.
Okay, well, hello, my name is Joni McDougal, and my boss and the executive director of Timpanogos Legal Center unfortunately could not do this presentation today. So I apologize that you're stuck with me, but I think I'm very happy to be presenting on Timpanogos Legal Center. So Timpanogos Legal Center is much newer than Legal Aid Society or Utah Legal Services. We began in 2008. I've been with Timpanogos Legal Center since 2016, so much newer. I was the 4th attorney hired. We're now up to 10. So that's a little bit. Can we go to the next slide? I think, okay, so we're a legal nonprofit. We service low-income individuals up to 200% of the federal poverty guidelines and or victims of domestic violence, regardless of income. We mostly assist with family law. We can offer some limited help with housing law and elder law. We do assist the entire state of Utah. We do not offer full representation. So that is a big difference between Timpanogos Legal Center and Legal Aid Society or Utah Legal Services. We frequently refer clients to Legal Aid Society and Utah Legal Services when we're speaking with a client on our hotline or have gotten in touch with a client through email that seems like they would be a good candidate for those organizations. And then a lot of times if clients are unable to qualify for whatever reason for those organizations, we are a really great option for those clients to kind of assist them as they are representing themselves pro se. So we can offer free legal advice. I'll talk a little bit more about that. We also have a document clinic where we can prepare court documents for the pro se clients that they can then file in the court as they're representing themselves. So can offer that help. Susan Griffith's philosophy kind of on that is that a lot of times if the paperwork, if the court documents are drafted really well and are really solid, then that can assist the clients incredibly as they are representing themselves during their cases. So can we go to the next slide? Okay, so I tried to focus on the services that we offer that would probably fit this meeting the best for this audience. So we have our hotline. It's right there. It's 801-649-8895. It's available Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. You can text into the hotline as well. An attorney is the first person you talk to. So only attorneys answer the hotline. There's no receptionist or anything like that. So that is something that I think a lot of clients really like. We, as you probably can imagine, especially since COVID, the hotline has just gotten tons more calls. And so sometimes it's a struggle, I think, for some clients to get through, but we do get to clients. And like I said, you can text as well. I realize I think I left off our email address as well, but let me see. Yeah, I might have not put that on there, but the email address, or so maybe I could send this to you, Ellen, and you could include it as well. But the email address, the general email is tlcinfo@timplegal.org. So tlcinfo@timplegal, that's TIMPLEGAL.org. And then our website is www.timplegal.org. So there's that as well. So that's the hotline, and on the hotline, the purpose of the hotline is to answer questions, legal questions. If it seems like it's a case that would be a good candidate for our document clinic, which I'll talk about in a second, that calling the hotline can be a gateway to being screened for the document clinic. I guess I should also mention that 3 of our 10 attorneys speak Spanish. So we do service the Spanish speaking community. And yes, and so the hotline is a great way to get in touch with us. That's something that is definitely used by several clients, and it is statewide. Family Justice Center Clinic. So before COVID, it was only held in Provo. I have the address there at 151 South University Avenue, Provo. We actually have opened that back up again, so you can still have the option of arriving in person. So it's every Tuesday night from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. The in-person option is just first come, first serve. There is no need to schedule an appointment for that. However, we also now, since COVID, have been operating an online legal clinic through Zoom. We can also call clients if they don't have access to a computer or are not able to operate Zoom. We can hold those appointments over the phone. So basically what it is that the client can speak with an attorney on a Tuesday night about various, so again, we focus on the family law, a little bit of elder law, and housing law. I know that the in-person clinic does have an immigration attorney, but the immigration attorney is not there every Tuesday night. And I think that since COVID, it hasn't been something that we've had a really firm schedule on. So if I can look into that and kind of follow up if there's questions about that. You're also welcome to text into the hotline and ask if there is an updated schedule of the, if there's an updated schedule of when the immigration attorney will be there. So we do not handle immigration law. I should also say that we don't offer help in responding to any debt collection case. So we do not handle that. It's just the family law, a little bit of elder law and housing law. Okay, so that's the Family Justice Center Clinic. So how to get an appointment for the online. Again, the online is Tuesday nights as well. They run the same time, same day of the week. It's just that one option is to do online, one option is in person. So our numbers were down. We started the online clinic as soon as COVID hit. I will say the in-person clinic, we've purchased plexiglass partitions. So there's plexiglass and there's spacing, I believe, in the waiting room as well as the tables around. So just to throw that out there, the online clinic is offered for anyone living statewide. So the in-person clinic, you don't have to be living in Utah County or 4th District, but it's just inconvenient for people to travel a lot of times to Provo. Okay, so I think that is the gist of the Family Justice Center Clinic. The document clinic. So this is a clinic that we have where we screen clients for it. Again, it's the low-income individuals and or victims of domestic violence. In addition, we have to make sure it's one of the documents that we regularly handle. So protective orders, actually, usually we refer out to either victim advocates, or if they do live in Salt Lake County Legal Aid Society. But we do help with petitions of divorce, counter petitions, answers. We help with the petition for a custody case, counter petition for that. We can help with motions for alternative service. We can help with motions to enforce the order, petitions to modify the order. So basically most of the family law documents we can help with, having to do with divorces or custody cases. So the document clinic, like I said, a good way to see if you qualify for that is by, you can email in, but we do prefer to talk to you on the phone. And so if you call into the hotline, or you can also attend the Family Justice Center Clinic and then be referred on to the document clinic from there. And so, what am I missing? And so, yeah, so with the document clinic, what will happen is every week, the attorneys that handle the document clinic meet, go over all the applications received from that week for document clinic, and then decide which ones we can take. By the time they're referred, most of the ones we actually can take. Usually we can take the cases that are referred, but occasionally we can't, either because they do not qualify or because the likelihood of success in court is low, in our opinion, and we prefer to give help through document clinic for a reasonably high likelihood of success, those cases. So we are also, this is very new, we're starting an in-person and virtual document clinic the first and third Tuesdays from 5 to 8 p.m. at the historic courthouse ballroom in Provo. So I think I there's a little mistake on the slide there, but it's the historic courthouse ballroom in Provo. And so with that, the idea of this type of document clinic is for those cases that a relatively short document. So we're talking an answer to a divorce, possibly a motion to enforce or a motion for alternative service, I believe. And so documents that we could, with the help of volunteers or paralegals, draft that night, and then the client would be able to be on their way. If it's going to be a petition for custody or a petition for divorce, that would not be the best fit for that in-person clinic. So we kind of have that's new, very new. And I believe with that, you do need to schedule an appointment so that we can verify that the document would be a good fit for that in-person document clinic. And like I said, I think the idea is to have both an in-person and a virtual kind of setup where through Zoom and sharing the screen, the attorney could possibly draft a document and then send it to the client via email. All right, so I believe that is the bulk of what I think would be the most helpful, like I said, of our services. We also have, thank you, other legal clinics. This is a little bit sad because before COVID, we had several up and running in-person legal clinics. One of the effects of COVID for our organization has been that those in-person legal clinics have not been held. So right now, the one that we do have still going or up and going again, it was closed for a time, is Brigham City. It's held the second Tuesday of the month from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. To sign up, you call 435-723-5600. And there's the address. It's held at the New Hope Crisis Center, 435 East 700 South, Brigham City. I know it is open to victims, but then also to low-income individuals. So it's not just victims. We have a few clinics that are held only for victims at shelters. So I did not include those here. And next slide, I think there's just one more slide. Okay, so we have a few other services, but again, I didn't think it was probably the right maybe setting to delve into these. There's a pro se pretrial calendar that right now is only being held, to my knowledge, in the 4th District, which is Utah County. We have some shelter legal clinics, like I just mentioned, and then a new, we got some funding for a CAP program, which stands for Certified Advocate Partners Program, and it's to help increase access to justice to victims of domestic violence, allowing certain qualified victim advocates who have gone through the right program to be able to offer some limited legal advice to victims of domestic violence, because we believe that by so doing, it will increase the protection. It will increase the amount of protective orders that they file. So The Pro Se Pretrial Calendar actually, I believe, was started by Stewart Rouse and other just in third district. You can correct me, Stewart, if you want, but we have started one, I think ever since 2008, have tried to kind of run one in fourth district, kind of mirroring that. So we've also tried to hold it out in Vernal, and we're doing that before COVID, but since COVID have not been able to kind of get some of those started back up again. So that is the bulk of our services and what I think could benefit. I don't know if there's any questions or if I need to clarify. I think I see some questions on the chat. What areas of law do you practice or specialize? So again, family law, a little bit of elder law and housing law. And I think that's, yeah, I don't know if I see any other questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Joni. That was really, really helpful. And thank you for all the great work you're doing in our community.
Yes,
So
I should just mention, we do help Spanish, like I said, we help Spanish speaking clients. I think I said that. And then we help with, we have most of our handouts now are translated into Spanish. So I'll just say that. And our, we can email our, what's it called? The application. Sorry, we always work with email mostly. We're mostly virtual. All of the attorneys work from their homes. So we don't have like a place of business, but we can mail by snail mail the application if needed. So we can do that. And then I'll also say that we can accept clients regardless of legal status. So I'll just add that as well. Sorry about that.
great. Thank you so much. So I'm going to turn the time over now to Adina Zahradnikova to talk about the Disability Law Center.
Thank you so much for having me. Again, my name is Adina Zahradnikova. I'm the Executive Director of the Disability Law Center. And the Disability Law Center is Utah's protection and advocacy agency for people with disabilities. We can go to the next slide. We are part of a federally mandated system of protection and advocacy agencies. And we enforce the rights of people with disabilities. In every state and territory, there's an agency like ours. There's one PNA or Protection and Advocacy Agency for the Native American Nation. So there's 57 of us. So you'll find us again in every state and territory. And most of the PNAs are nonprofit organizations. Some, I would say the minority of the PNAs still reside in state government, but I would say that probably 80 to 90% are nonprofit organizations like ours. And we are, we're designated by the governor of Utah in 1977 to be the Protection and Advocacy Agency for People with Disabilities. And we've been able to maintain that designation for over 40 years. We're also a partner, one of the partner agencies of Injustice for All. And as my distinguished colleague, Stewart Rolfs mentioned, we're probably the middle child. We're not the oldest or the largest, we're right in the middle. So our mission is to enforce and strengthen the laws that protect the opportunities, choices, and legal rights of Utahns with disabilities. And we do that using a plethora of methods, and we have a lot of tools at our disposal, ranging from simple information and referral and some, self-help, just tips on how to be a self-advocate, self-advocacy assistance, all the way to class action lawsuits and more systemic litigation projects. We also have a public policy team that works on making the laws that protect the rights of people with disabilities better at the state level and at the federal level. So a little bit about the types of cases that we take. We take a lot of accessibility cases. That would be our, perhaps, our bread and butter type of case. Title II and Title III cases, that is access to buildings where there are barriers for people with disabilities. They cannot access a library, a courthouse, a school, so that is a physical barrier. but also programmatic barriers, lack of denials of accommodations, of reasonable accommodations to access government programs, and also under Title II and Title III public places of public accommodation, such as restaurants, movie theaters, and so on and so forth. So every time that there is an access issue, an individual with disability who has experienced that barrier can call our center and talk to one of our intake advocates, and we would open a case. There's a question, does that include being denied for voc rehab? Absolutely. I'll get to that in a minute. We are the client assistance program for the state of Utah, and we monitor voc rehab and the independent living centers, and that includes, providing advocacy on behalf of applicants of voc rehab when they're denied eligibility for vocational rehabilitation assistance or assistance from an independent living center, all the way to, I would say maybe just denial of services, conflict with a counselor. So we provide that type of advocacy on behalf of both applicants and clients of voc rehab. Assistive technology, we take a lot of cases that deal with denials of AT, assistive technology, and that can be anything from a wheelchair to a very sophisticated device. We've done titanium ribs and sea legs and cochlear implants, just to name a few, especially if they're denied by Medicaid and Medicare. Our current case criteria allows people to get assistance from our attorneys with those denials. Sometimes we would take a private insurance denial. Those are a little bit more complicated, but they're not excluded. It's just that the vast majority of our cases are based on denials from Medicaid or Medicare. We enforce, a variety of civil rights statutes. I mentioned the ADA. We do a lot of Title I cases, employment discrimination. That is anything from, being denied an opportunity to have a job because, an individual has a disability, all the way to being, let go, fired, demoted for having a disability, or, being denied reasonable accommodations in employment. That is one of our newer programs. It's been in existence for less than 10 years. Initially, we thought we would take, maybe, 25 cases a year just to see if there's a need. Currently, we have probably between 300 and 500 requests for assistance every year in that area. And we're basically inundated with requests. There aren't too many attorneys in the private bar that would take a plaintiff's case, and so we're plaintiff's attorneys, and we try to help as many people as we can. Again, it starts with a clinic. It starts with a call to our intake team, our short-term assistance team, and then the individual experiencing that discrimination in employment has an opportunity to meet with one of our employment attorneys. During a 1-hour clinic, we assess the facts and the law and decide, what's the best course of action if we can, assist with an administrative complaint with a state agency, or in many cases, file the case in federal court. We also do a lot of advocacy on behalf of individuals with disabilities who are institutionalized. We believe that segregating people with disability is wrong, morally wrong and dangerous, and we are advocates for community inclusion and community living. So we have special education law practice where we provide legally based advocacy services for students with disabilities in the public school system, K through 12, who have experienced discrimination in education. And many of you may be familiar with the concept of an IEP. It's an individualized education program for students with disabilities. When there is a question about services, a conflict about services to be provided on an IEP, or, sometimes, again, it starts with eligibility for services, for special education services. Or, that we get a lot of complaints of illegal discipline, restraint and seclusion, situations that border abuse and neglect, unfortunately, in the public school system. And the process is very similar. We have the same, it's a standard process. The client would call our intake and, just sort of provide the facts, and then they will get to speak with an attorney during the clinic about their situation. One of the programs that is sort of unique is our fair housing program, because we serve people with disabilities, and we serve people with mental, physical, neurological, intellectual disabilities, traumatic brain injuries, so that everybody with a disability is eligible for our services. But in our fair housing program, we serve people of all protected classes, and that is both state and federally protected classes. This is a partnership with HUD. We are the private enforcement agency for HUD in Utah. We're the only private enforcement agency in our state. And, again, that program is sort of, client focused. We get a lot of individual complaints of illegal practices in housing, discriminatory practices. And again, it's not just from people with disabilities, but people, of various protected classes. I mentioned the Medicaid and Medicare appeals. I mentioned the employment, our employment practice, and our client assistance program. There are some, areas that I have not included. We have a small overpayment practice, a Social Security overpayment practice, where people who are currently in cash status and have received a notice of overpayment can come to us, for assistance. We also have a voting program where we assist people with disabilities who want to cast an independent vote and a private vote and are unable to do so due to barriers that they may have. I think I'd like to mention the fact that the vast majority of our requests for assistance are resolved at the short team assistance level. So we provide a lot of self-advocacy tips. We teach people, how to request an accommodation in employment, how to make a request for a reasonable accommodation in housing, how to talk to a landlord, how to talk to the school district, and how to be an advocate for those services. If those interventions are not sufficient, we always advise our callers to call back and come back for more in-depth assistance. Are there any questions about those cases, the types of cases that?
We have a quick question in the chat. Does that include being denied for vocational rehab?
Yes, absolutely. As I mentioned, we are the client assistance program. The CAP program monitors voc rehab, so we are definitely taking those cases. And to be very honest, we need more of those cases. We have recently hired a CAP advocate, and we have some attorney time, and I think they want and are capable, of doing more in this area. So we're currently looking at some systemic issues in the voc rehab system, but we have the capacity to take on more individual cases in that area. A lot of our work is done in institutional settings. PNAs, protection and advocacy agencies, were created to prevent abuse and neglect of people with disabilities in institutional settings. So you will find us in wherever people with disabilities are. We'll be in jails, in prisons, in juvenile detention centers, in nursing homes, in group homes, just to name a few settings where people with disabilities may reside. So we always would respond to an allegation of abuse and neglect. And, we give priority to those cases. So if we have a report of, an individual with disability being abused in any of these institutional settings, we would give it, our utmost attention and priority, because, that's our role. We were created to protect the rights of people with disabilities, and those who are in institutional settings are sort of out of sight, out of mind, and they need an added layer of protection. And I forgot to mention that we have an extraordinary access authority. The Congress, the United States Congress, gave us through federal statutes the ability to access people with disabilities wherever they are. So we have we have access to records, people through, impromptu monitoring. We can show up, and just request to visit a nursing home, or if we have a report of severe abuse or neglect, or if we have reports of abuse and neglect in a certain jail, we may decide to monitor that facility for 6 months or a year in order to see if people with disabilities are safe and they receive access to the services that they're entitled to. I think there was a question about veterans. Does the VOC rehab mix or mesh with any veterans? Does that pipeline already exist, or is that different alignment? So veterans, if they have a disability that qualifies them for VOC rehab, they can apply and potentially become eligible for those services. Again, the condition is to have a disability, and VOC rehab has a system. It's an order of selection, so they will always give priority to those with more significant disabilities. So those who have significant disabilities will get those services with priority. Does that answer the question? I just want to make sure we address the question. Okay. Again, in addition to our case work, we get about 4,000 requests for individual assistance with a legal issue every year. We maintain a presence in facilities that care for people with disabilities, and we engage in system change litigation, as I said, class action or, public policy initiatives aimed at, just changing the landscape for people with disabilities, making their lives better and safer, and ensuring that they have access to appropriate services. A little bit about disability, if we could go to the next slide, please. This is our vision. We envision a just society where all people are treated with equity, dignity, and respect. We meet people where they are, and we give people the dignity of choice. We always, honor the client's choice, even, at times, we disagree with that. We're advocates for choice. Wanted to just cover a few basic facts about disability, and then, I'll be happy to take your questions. So what is a disability? There's no universally accepted definition. At some point, I compiled about 17 definitions, from various federal statutes and state laws. The Social Security Administration has a definition of disability that is different than the ADA's or the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. What constitutes a disability is usually, it depends on who you ask, and it's usually based on a medical diagnosis. We, as a PNA, we fight against stigma associated with any type of disability, but we also understand that sometimes, that label is a passport to services. Without, the medical diagnosis, without, the disability, designation, we cannot be effective advocates for services for our clients. Disability, if we could go to the next slide, please. Disability is a naturally occurring part of the human experience. There have always been people with disabilities in the world, and there will always be. Like gender and like ethnicity, disability is simply one of many natural characteristics of being human. About 1 in 5 Americans is a person with a disability. At least 55 million people in the United States live with a disability, and this is the same in Utah. 1 in 6, about 300,000 are individuals with disabilities. Unemployment for people with disabilities is around 70%. It has probably gotten worse during COVID. We don't have any recent statistics, but the previous numbers were pretty depressing. Some people are born with disabilities, others acquire disabilities through, accidents, illnesses, or the aging process. Many folks who do not have disabilities will have one in the future. In fact, if we live to be 70, we have an 82% chance of experiencing disability ourselves. So again, it is a naturally occurring part of the human experience. And I think all of us have at least, a family member, a neighbor, a friend who lives with a disability. So I think that takes me to the last slide. We have an office in Salt Lake City, but our services are statewide. We are basically free of charge. Our services are free of charge for our clients. We do not check for, immigration status. We don't have any income eligibility guidelines. The only qualifier for our services is, basically having a disability and being discriminated against, being denied access to a service that you're entitled to based on that disability. That's our website. People can call us every day. Our intake is open every day from 9 till 4. On Fridays, we close at 1 p.m. But we have multiple advocates taking phone calls live. If you do leave a message, if we're inundated with calls and they can't get to you immediately, we have a policy of returning a phone call within 24 hours. And we try to the best of our abilities to honor that policy. And there might be exceptions, but we try to limit those. So you will get a call back from us. And if you need our assistance, you will talk to one of our short-term assistance advocates. They are trained to select cases, and they work closely with attorneys who supervise the issue teams that work on various cases. I'd like to add that we have 5 advocates who are bilingual. We have attorneys who are bilingual, Spanish and English. We have one who's trilingual, Portuguese, Spanish, and English. We offer our services we try to accommodate requests for all formats. Of course, ASL being our primary American Sign Language. But we also provide interpreters for other languages, alternative formats if people need information in Braille or large text or on a disc. Any of the informational materials that we publish can be provided that way. This is the DLC in a nutshell. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Thank you so much, Adina. We don't see any more questions in the chat, but thank you, Adina and Stewart and Joni, for all the amazing resources that you've covered this evening. I just wanted to real quick piggyback on the disability law topic and throw a quick plug out for our IDA program. A lot of people don't know this, but our match savings program, it's a 2-to-1 match savings program where qualified savers can save towards the purchase of a first-time home, small business, education, but also assistive technology for work-related expenses. So that portion of our IDA program is vastly underutilized. So if you need assistive technology and want to participate, please, I will put the information about our IDA program in the chat. But now I'm going to turn our time over to Mackenzie to wrap us up and cover a couple more resources and go over avoiding a judgment. So Mackenzie is one of our lead financial coach here at Fair Credit Foundation, and can take it away. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ellen, for the introduction. So I, as Ellen mentioned, am a financial coach and educator here at Fair Credit Foundation. And I just wanted to give some tips and pointers, though we don't offer legal advice and none of us are attorneys. We are there to help people amongst, that might be dealing with battling the option of, should I be filing bankruptcy? I am pending a judgment, or I'm worried about garnished wages. What are my options and what things can I do to prevent this? And that is where we can definitely help you step in regards to your finances. So I wanted to go over this slide really quick about communicating with your creditors. If there's anything that I have found, it is that making sure you're upfront with your creditors. I always make the joke with my clients that when you're in financial distress about losing a job or anything that might be financially binding at this time, call your mom, call your girlfriend, your significant other, but then call your creditor. And I'm serious about that because it's important. You have more options available to you when you're upfront with them and more proactive. So before you make those calls, what should you have ready? What should you be prepared with? First and foremost, have any personal documentation ready, whether it's making sure that you have the account number. If you don't know the account number, they might be able to look that up for you. Making sure that you have a piece of paper and pencil nearby to keep track of who you're speaking with. There's a reason as to why they, say at the beginning, calls might be recorded for quality assurance and insurance purposes. It's to not only protect them, but to also protect you. So making sure you're keeping track of who you speak with, at what time and what date. Be very transparent about your situation. Again, it will mean a lot if you say, hey, I just lost my job, versus you're now in a court setting or pending judgment. I lost my job 6 months ago. This is why I wasn't able to make payments. So being really transparent about the situation. Don't be afraid to ask for help or to figure out what your options are. Say, what are my options? And then please know that we are here as a resource to help you. So as a financial coach, that is one of our jobs, is to be able to help you be able to feel confident in contacting your creditors and being able to coach you along that process so that you're not doing it alone. Another resource, or I guess I shouldn't say resource, but a lot of questions that we get in regards to legal concerns is bankruptcy. Should I file bankruptcy? Is bankruptcy the answer for me? Again, we don't offer bankruptcy counseling, which is one of the things that are required as you're going through filing bankruptcy. We can definitely help you explore options to avoiding bankruptcy or to educating you if you are thinking about filing bankruptcy. So when it comes to you and I as everyday consumer, there are two types of bankruptcies that we would be two chapters of bankruptcy that you and I as your everyday consumer would be involved. So chapter 7 and chapter 13, and I've kind of listed them out here and how to understand the differences between the two. So chapter 7 is known as the liquidation bankruptcy. That's how I was able to remember it. It is where if you're at risk of, secured debts being lost, so whether like a home or, even cars, that is where that property is sold and used to pay off debts and or just, repossessed, meant for individuals for limited income who do not have the ability to pay back all or some of their debts. So this is where a majority really are all of your debts are liquidated, meaning that they are discharged. That does not mean, however, that showing on a credit report that those accounts are eliminated. It will just show that the balance is now zero, and they're not reported late from month to month, but it will be on the credit report that you have had those accounts discharged and be on the credit report for 10 years under Chapter 7. For both Chapter 7 and 13, a means test is done in order to determine eligibility, and not only if you qualify, but for what type of bankruptcy you do qualify for. An attorney isn't required, but it's often highly recommended as it is a legal process and it can be complicated. And it's nice to have somebody to walk you through that and to represent you. Then there's Chapter 13 bankruptcy, which is known as the reorganization bankruptcy. This is where property is not sold. It's completed by a court mandated repayment can become part of that process. So some of your debts might be discharged or liquidated, meaning that they're at a zero balance, whereas some might be salvaged and you might have more of a repayment program. So to save a house or a car or some other secured debts. This type of bankruptcy stays on your credit report for 7 years. The reason being is because it is that repayment program. So you might be actually paying back some of those debts under a court mandate. Again, a means test is determined if you are eligible for this type. And again, an attorney isn't required, but is highly recommended. So that is bankruptcy in a nutshell. Again, we don't offer the bankruptcy counseling that is required if you are filing, but we would love to be able to go over your credit report with you to determine what some of your options are if you're facing the fear of needing to file bankruptcy. And of course, if you've recently filed bankruptcy, or you have decided you're going to file bankruptcy, please still come to us. We would love to be able to help you go over some tactics and strategies to be able to rebuild your credit post-bankruptcy, whether you're currently in the process of filing or you filed in the last 7 to 10 years. I wanted to show a quick little resource. I'm actually going to skip this slide just due to time, but there is an awesome resource called Utah Self-Help Courts. And they can be contacted here by email, by phone, or by text message. In my experience in having clients be helped with this particular service, the helpline is really busy. So the best way that I would say is to reach out by email with any questions that you might have, and then text message would be the next best bet. They are really quick to respond. They don't represent you in court, but they can definitely give you the resources. So if you're like, hey, I need to file this documentation, or I have an eviction outstanding from years and years and it keeps creeping up and I don't even know who it was or what it is, you can always send them an email and say exactly what I just said, and you would give your basic information of your date of birth and your name, and they'd be able to find that court filing for you. Here are some additional resources that I wanted to just mention. So Utah Legal Services, I know was mentioned today quite a bit. There's their website. Immigrant Legal Services, their website is there. Their Utah Community Action has a tenant landlord mediation and education program, which is awesome. And I know that one of the main individual who houses that was here today, Heather Lester. She's an awesome resource. And you can write down that phone number to get in contact with that program. Mountain Mediation is another legal nonprofit that serves Summit in Wasatch County, and their phone number is listed there, as I know that sometimes there are some boundaries restrictions that don't serve, every county or the whole state. So that one is specific to Summit and Wasatch County. Then we also wanted to make sure that you were aware of more southern Utah, serving St. George and Cedar City. They're known as Southern Utah Community Legal Center, and their phone number is listed there. And then last but not least, if there is anything that wasn't covered today or resources for legal services that you aren't aware of or curious to know if they exist, please don't ever hesitate to reach out to 211 or visit 211utah.org. They have a wide variety of knowledge and a database that would be able to help direct you as to maybe regarding the situation that you are in need of, or scenario, they can lead you to what legal source would be the best fit. Again, we at Fair Credit Foundation, our #1 goal is to help you to be able to improve you and your family improve your financial well-being. So take the first step with us today. You can go to our website, faircredit.org, and on our Contact Us tab, you can go and fill out a form to have us contact you in regards to some of your interest in our products or our services. Or you can also just book an appointment straight from that Contact Us page to meet with one-on-one with a financial coach. We are kind of in a hybrid right now, mainly doing appointments over the phone, but we have 1 or 2 days a week where we do have a counselor in office that is available to meet with you in person. We have loved having everyone join our webinars, our monthly webinars. Please keep coming back. Each month is a different topic, and we're so grateful to the 3 guest speakers that we had today. Ralph Stewart's, or Stewart Ralph's. I'm sorry, get those mixed up. I know that my executive director, Ellen Billy, having that first and last name too, has that concern too of always switching up the names. And then Adina and Joni, we are so thankful for your help today. And is there any final questions that we might have thrown in the chat today before we go? Okay, thank you so much. And again, this has been recorded and will be on our YouTube page within the next couple of days. So thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, everyone.